All right, it is 1:01. I think I had a couple more people RSVP, but I will try to catch them up as they pop in. This is the academic year 25-26, my disclosures training for approvers and assistants. And I have the chat open in a second window, so if you have any questions, there is a lot of information. Please feel free to put it in the chat, and I will address those out loud to help anyone that needs them. So if you are familiar with the RNUA, I'm sure you've seen a lot of this before. If you are not familiar, this might be new information. You may have seen it in the emails that were coming from the Office of Research Administration. We were trying to get a lot of this done on the front end. In the past, it was more reminders on the back end, which is not necessarily best practice. So we are trying to kind of buffer for that moving forward. So the RNUA is the report of non-university activities, and this is the disclosure that covered individuals, which are employees covered by the policy, submit to comply with that policy, which is often called the COCI or the COSI policy, which is conflicts of commitment and interest. So the policy changed in 2024, and it covers faculty, specialized faculty, academic professionals, which does include 0% appointments, postdocs, academic hourlies, hourly faculty, and visiting scholars, which a lot of our visiting scholars were not aware that that applied to them. This disclosure is due within 30 days of joining the university. Anytime you will engage in a new outside activity, when a previously disclosed activity changes, and then annually each fall. I think this year it was a little earlier than normal, but it is typically in the September, October time. And the reason we do this is to have everything in one place for reviewing, approving, and managing those potential conflicts of commitment or interest. And that is because the universities are required to do this through the Research and Consulting Act as well as the State Ethics Act. Within the system, there are approver roles, there are assistant roles, and then there are read-only roles as well. And typically in trainings, those are, toward the Champaign office, and UIS does it a little bit different, where our deans are typically the first level of review, or in areas that don't have deans, the executive directors or the similar positions in the hierarchy. And then the second level approver goes up through that hierarchy. And in academic affairs, that's the provost or his designated leadership team member, with some exceptions. And then in other divisions, typically the vice chancellor of that division is the first level, with the second level going to the chancellor. Again, some exceptions. And throughout the training, we do say UEO because at Champaign, it's at the unit level, but at UIS, it's, at that dean or higher level, but it's used interchangeably. We're just referring to UEOs as the approvers that have that assignment in myDisclosures. So assistants, I tried to ask earlier in the year if our UEOs wanted assistants to help them streamline the process. And assistants can do just about everything approvers can do, except for that final approval at the end. So they can recommend a status, they can set exemptions, they can return disclosures asking questions to get more material, or just really anything needed to move it from not approved to approved. Approvers at the first level are responsible for managing potential or actual conflicts of commitment or interest, and they really can't defer that to someone else. They can, with or without an assistant, view the disclosures, assign a status, comment, attach explanations for management mechanisms. If a plan is already in place, they can upload that, and then they complete that first level of review. A lot of these are really simple and easy to approve. However, if a conflict management plan does need to be in place, it would be forwarded for a second level approver. And that only goes to them if forward for further review is selected. They have fewer options when it comes to what they can do. They can view, confirm the assigned status, or they can return it for more information, which we'll get into a little further down the line. So we'll go over how to access reviewer mode if you've never had to get into that dashboard, how to set an exemption, how to review the outside activities, and make a decision whether to return the entire disclosure, return a single activity, approve the outside activity, deny an activity, which hopefully you don't have to do, or to forward for a second level of review. I'll touch a little bit on what second level reviewers do, but a lot of it does roll into what first level approvers do. And then we'll have just a couple tips for success at the end. So if you had previously saved the link, I believe AITS changed it a little bit this year. So if it says forbidden access, if you had it bookmarked, it's just a different website. So it's now mydisclosures.uillinois.edu. And first level of review deadline is Monday, which is why I really wanted to get this training out. And then if anything is forwarded for a second level of review, that deadline is not until November 10th. So when you log into that website, it'll take you more than likely to your own portal. So to get into reviewer mode, you would hover over your name in the corner and switch to reviewer mode, which will take you to your reviewer dashboard. It will show you the different roles you have been assigned, whether it's approver, assistant, or read-only. If you don't want to have read-only access showing, like if you have 12 units, but you really only need to approve 2, you can have that removed by unclicking that box and having it just show the approver and the assistant access. So you'll see that there are some awaiting review, which is an action on the approver or assistant part, or pending, which might be on the disclosures part, or you as an approver might have to go in and set an exception for some employees, which you don't really know until you go into that unit. So by clicking on the unit, it will show you your buckets. You have your pending buckets, your ready for review buckets, and then your total. So ones that are pending are not in your queue. Those are the employees in that unit, either that haven't been submitted or that have submitted and you've returned it to them and you are waiting for a response. So again, some of these might require some action on your part instead of the employee. So going into it, it will have a name of your employee. And if there is a gold asterisk, it's not super common. I think I've only seen 2 for UIS this year. That is an employee who has submitted an RNUA under a different organization. So that will show up in their past disclosures. And you as a reviewer can view that past disclosure and decide if that is good to approve by creating an exemption, or you can ask them to submit a new disclosure that will show up in your ready to review after they submit it. Most employees will not have that asterisk. And so if they just need to complete it, you will need to communicate that with them and have them complete it. Or in some instances, you as an approver need to set that exemption. So those exemptions need to be manually set if an employee has a 0% unpaid appointment and they are not doing any research activities. If they were employed by another organization, the 2 employees I saw, I believe, were adjuncts at UIS, but their primary appointment is at Champaign. So it was a disclosure they submitted, but it wasn't specifically to our unit. If the employee has left the university and the HR data and banner has not updated yet, a manual exemption has to be set. I know at least 3 of our missing disclosures are people who've left the university. If the employee is on a medical or other approved leave of absence, an exemption can be set for them. However, if the employee is continuing to conduct research, administer a grant, or apply for sponsored projects while they're on their leave of absence, they should still be completing their RNUA. And then the approver is responsible for ensuring that they complete the RNUA once they're back on campus or doing their university duties. If the employee has passed, their RNUA needs to be exempted. And then if their position has been recently reclassified as civil service, they do not have to complete the RNUA and you would need to set the exemption. Civil service has a different disclosure policy and procedure that's handled by HR instead of research and sponsored programs. And it's a totally different portal. When you click create exemption, those different options will drop down. You'll click which one applies and then create the exemption, and that will move it from pending into completed. Things that are in the ready for review bucket do have to be manually reviewed. So by clicking on that, it will take you to a list of your employee names, and it is up to you and your best judgment to determine if the activities they listed potentially represent a conflict of commitment or a conflict of interest. And again, assistants can set a recommendation, but they cannot finalize the review. So a COI or a conflict of interest, based on the policy definitions, occur when the employee engages in an activity that might influence their professional judgment and mostly to the detriment of the university. Not whether they're actually making those decisions, but if they could. If they are in a position to influence university business, research, or other university activities for their own gain, again, to the detriment of the university, or if the individual or their immediate family member are or seek to be in a vendor or contracting relationship. So you can kind of notice these happen when they're in a position to direct the work of students or staff that are at the university that could benefit their non-university activity or company. If they are on a transaction, both for UIS and for their entity, that could be a conflict of interest. If they are using university resources for a non-university activity, that is a conflict of interest. Or if they're in a position to make decisions on behalf of the university to unfairly benefit themselves or their family. These are those conflicts where there's this muddying of university and non-university activities. A conflict of commitment is a lot more common than a conflict of interest, and this is when an outside activity could reasonably interfere with their university responsibilities. And you kind of start to notice that if the employee is missing an action, if they have just completely double booked themselves between university job and outside job or activity. If there's a job performance issue, you might start to think there might be a conflict of commitment. Or if they're benefiting another institution or entity, there might be this overlap in their commitments that could cause potential issues. And then new for this year is with mostly travel, but for foreign entities, there is a law that went into effect in 2022, I believe, where we had 2 years to implement a foreign entity disclosure system. So now when foreign countries are listed, the system will prompt the discloser to upload supporting documentation, whether it's a contract, a grant, or any other sort of agreement specific to that. And we're really just making sure that there's no issues with it. The government really wants us checking for malign foreign involvement. So that's what we're looking for there. Once you get into the disclosure, you'll see different symbols, and those are the different actions you can take. And each activity will have its own summary, and you can click Show Details to see more. And you'll get an entity summary, an overview, lots of information about what the employee is doing with this outside entity or activity, whether it's located in the United States or not. And if it is not, it will automatically look at the question answers and decide if a further influence review is needed by export control, which UIS, it's an all-in-one office with research and innovation. And again, it'll summarize time, financial interest, the different commitments that are put toward that. It'll show their role. If they are disclosing their family members' activities, it will say their family members' role. And if there are any additional comments they want to add, any additional attachments that are required, that will all show up on the same screen. If you feel you need to return the entire disclosure, if you know they have another activity that they didn't disclose, the entire disclosure has to go back for them to add a new activity. If you have a question about just one activity, don't hit the yellow box. You can return just a single activity instead of the entire disclosure. So returning one activity is this little back arrow, and they will be able to edit just that activity. And you should make sure that you're putting a comment in that asking for specific information. In the past, I've seen some get returned that have no comment on them. I think AITS has changed it so that comment is now required so that they know why it's being returned and they can make those revisions and resubmit it. When you hit returned, it does go back into your pending bucket and it will not be ready for review until they resubmit. Another option is to approve, what we hope to be able to do as long as there are enough details. And if you approve, that ends the routing. It goes into the complete bucket. There's no further action. You should choose that if there is no conflict or if it didn't actually have to be reported. They added it for extra safe measure. And if you are uncertain of what is or is not something that needs to be reported, or you need to look at procedures, there are several different links I included in today's invite that include a link to the policy itself, which is very dense. So the procedures do outline it a little more clearly depending on your role. Section B is specifically for reviewers. On the UIS report of non-university activities, if you were to go to research and sponsored programs under our integrity programs, conflicts of interest has a special page dedicated to report of non-university activities. And at the bottom is guidance for what does and doesn't need disclosed. So if you need to approve it because, they didn't have to report some of their travel, if it was personal travel, or if they were a student in continuing education and they disclosed that it wasn't necessary, you can approve those instead of returning it and asking them to delete it. If you want to make sure the employee knows that it's been approved, that you've reviewed it, not just clicked a button, you are welcome to add that you have evaluated it with respect to their duties, their responsibilities, and their research. And in your evaluation, it does not present a conflict of commitment or interest. When you approve, a comment is not required. But again, if you want there to be no uncertainty, this is a sample sentence you could put. In some cases, if you think there is absolutely nothing that could be done to make an activity approvable, if it couldn't be managed, you would deny it. And again, I don't think I've ever seen this happen, but if there was a direct conflict with their position, if they took a 9 to 5 job on top of working 9 to 5 at UIS, these are very clear conflicts that would require denial. That is only available at the home unit. So if the employee has multiple appointments in different units, the additional unit UEOs would need to speak to the home unit and ask them to deny. And once it goes through everything, the submitter is notified. They are able to appeal if they feel like there are management plans that could make it feasible to do both. And then in those instances, the provost serves as the arbiter and then makes the final decision on the appeal. And then the one that has the most information on it is if you need to forward for a second level of review. So this is if you notice that an activity presents an actual or potential conflict and would require some sort of management. When you select this, you should explain what the conflict is and then how it could be managed. Just because a conflict is possible does not mean that it is denied or unallowable. It just has to have some clear boundaries between what's happening for the university and what's happening for the other entity. And if it is an entire management plan, it's uploaded as an attachment. Otherwise, it can be entered as a couple sentences in a comment. So a formal plan would need to be developed when the employee or if they have a startup company meets any of these criteria. If there's significant commitment, If they're licensing university IP, especially if the academic staff member is the inventor, if they are employing people from the university, whether it's students or other university employees, if they're using university resources, if they have a company that funds research or gifts at the university, if there's an agreement to use the university resources, that's one of those management plans that can help. If they have a startup company that receives business awards, and SBIR, STTR, and DARPA are some of the more common ones. And then if it's needed for any other reason, if there needs to be a clear plan to separate the work for the university and the work for the outside activity, this plan would be in place, and that's really up to the approver and the UEO. So some potential conflicts are low level, none of the previous apply. This huge formal management plan does not need to be enacted. There are simpler management techniques that are sufficient. So when you are forwarding for a second level of review, you can put that this could present a conflict of interest or a conflict of commitment, and the department will implement X, Y, and Z. And some of those could be spending less time on an activity, revising and resubmitting. It could be I've approved it and will reevaluate in 2 months to see if it's starting to cause an issue. I approve it as it is, and we will submit a work plan every 2 weeks. If they have a teaching appointment elsewhere, make sure that it's limited for a defined period of time. They're listed as visiting or adjunct, just making sure there's this clear commitment to the university versus another outside institution. And there is a suggested management plan guide that is linked in today's invite, where there are several different examples of potential conflicts and then mechanisms that could be included that don't have to have an entire plan. If a plan is needed, there is a formal management plan available, and it's been changed from previous years to this year to be hopefully a little friendlier. Instead of filling out as many blanks, there's a lot more check boxes that just need extra details if they're applicable. So it covers a bunch of different mechanisms for different types of conflicts. And if that management plan is needed, it should be edited with input from the employee, their unit head, and then either currently Lucia or a designee from Lucia's office, which in this case is probably myself. But getting all of that input and making sure that everyone is in alignment with what the plan is. UIS does have a conflict review committee with 2 faculty members and 1 academic professional who should review the plan, provide feedback, and once that feedback is addressed, it can be routed for signatures to have that official plan in place. And then that will be uploaded onto the RNUA every year for as long as the employee is involved with the entity. It does not have to be updated every year as long as the activity hasn't changed. It just needs to be uploaded. When it does get forwarded for a second level of review, it automatically appears in the second level reviewer's workflow, and it will show needs further review with the explanation that that first level reviewer put on it. They will review activities and the management plan, and if they need additional information, they can send it back asking for it and work with the employee and their approver to finalize a management plan if needed. If nothing is needed, they can approve and it finalizes and finish its routing. Or again, they can send it back to the UEO for revision. They cannot send it directly back to the disclosure. Only the first level reviewer can do that. But it'll just cycle through these continuously until something is approvable or gets denied. So one big tip for success is make a plan with the assistant if you have one for your unit. Most do, but not all. So
And
check,
are
are they
they,
monitoring the submissions? Are they sending emails to the stragglers? As of today, I think there's 30 missing disclosures. Will they pre-review activities and set recommendations, or does the UEO want to do that completely by themselves? If a conflict management plan is in place, are you going to have the assistant upload it? Are you expecting the disclosure to do that, or will you do that as the UEO? And then one that I do as soon as the deadlines are announced is set a calendar reminder. First level of review, again, is October 20th. Second level is November 10th. And then a couple weeks ago was the deadline for the actual disclosures on September, I want to say 29th was when that closed. If you have questions, the Office of Research Administration inbox is always open. Things that we can do are update approvers. We try to do that on July 1st every year, so it's ready when the deadlines are announced. But some get overlooked because it is manually updated. We can update assistants. If you want to add more than one assistant, we can do that at any point. If you need us to pull any reports, we can do that. Whenever I was sending out emails of the missing ones, that was the report I was pulling. We can assist with conflict management plans. Because there was a reorganization a couple years ago, some hierarchical things have not fully been updated. So if you do need that changed, if you notice things are not rolling up correctly, if a unit was renamed and that's not reflecting, we can speak with AITS to try to get that updated. But it is not fast. Just as a heads up, that is one of the slower changes because it is based on banner data. So things have to be updated in banner before it's updated in myDisclosures. And we have those management tools on the back end, but we only have read-only permissions, so we can't return disclosures, we can't add comments or set statuses on them. That is outside of what we can do. And that was a speed run, but are there any questions, comments, concerns? Yeah, Dr. Wallace.
yeah,
See your hand
I have
raised.
I have a question. And this may be obvious, but I figure I'll put it out there anyway. We have a number of people who are adjuncts. Now, obviously, they all have other jobs. If they're teaching a single course for us, this is not their full-time job. And some of them also work for other entities that we do in fact work with, like, and I'm thinking about particularly Illinois Symphony Orchestra. So I've always been a little puzzled about what I'm supposed to do when those come forward. We're not going to ask them to quit their day job to make
Right.
something their entire thing. And of course, if you've gone through the training, the kinds of connections with organizations like that are actually really beneficial. So I just wondered if you had any guidance, but there's an awful lot of that out there that doesn't
Yes.
fit idly into the way this is set up.
Right. So they would obviously put, my primary job is XYZ, and here's how I'm making sure I'm not using their resources unnecessarily for UIS, and I'm not using UIS's resources unnecessarily for the other entity. It's really making sure that there's not some sort of advantage being taken by having both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sort of.
I'm trying to think if there's a good example.
I mean, when a lot of stuff is not 9 to 5, it's really hard to, sort of know what we're talking about. So,
Yeah, we're not saying no, they can't have, extra jobs. We're not saying any of that. People need to work. We're really just saying use your resources appropriately. So I'm not using time while I should be working for UIS, logging into a second job, or working remotely outside of the hours I shouldn't be. It's just making sure there's a clear delineation of what I'm doing for UIS and what I'm doing elsewhere. And as an approver, as long as you think there's enough details, that should be an easy approve. And it shouldn't need any sort of management.
okay. Yeah, that's kind of what I've been assuming, but thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Emily.
Right, thanks. Um, okay, so we're in a similar situation as Miriam. We have a lot of a lot of our adjuncts are teaching for the institutions who we are then selling back our courses to. Like, right? So we have, like, for example, Western Illinois University. We want some of their faculty to come take our trainings, but their faculty also teach our courses. And I know that we can just take those case by case, just like the example you just gave. And I think what it comes down to is use your own personal resources for your kind of your side gigs, right? Don't use your WIU resources to do UIS work and vice versa.
Right.
So I think I understand that portion of it, but then some of our extra help workers who do instructional design work also have other jobs. Same rules would apply there. But let's say they were expected to work here on a project, but they had a conflict at their other job, and they cleared it with me by saying something like, "Hey, I told you I'd work 10 hours this week, but I can only work 5. I have some other deadline at my other job." Would they have to take vacation? Like, could they take vacation time? I guess this really wouldn't apply for my extra help people, but for like a part-time employee, take vacation time here to do what they have to do at their other job? Like, is that acceptable in that kind of situation?
Vacation time, yes, is acceptable. An alternative is approving an alternative work schedule for a short period of time. That's another option.
Okay.
Yeah, because it
Okay,
doesn't
cool.
have to be a 9 to 5, work gets done outside as long as it's approved. That is a management mechanism.
Okay, great. All right. I kind of figured that. I mean, as long as everyone's just sort of communicating, we work something out and everybody's good with it. I
Yeah.
figured that was okay, but I thought this was a good time to ask that question. All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Thank you.
And if situations ever pop up, you know, the RNUA can be done at any time. We just have the annual disclosure, so it's up to date for everyone every year. But send me a message, send ORA a message. It's pretty constantly monitored, so we can help out in those case by case situations.
Thank you.
And if there's nothing else, I see nothing in the chat. It didn't have to be an hour long training, I guess, today. So hopefully you can get some more work done in that extra 27 minutes you had booked. But thank you guys for taking time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Krista. That was really helpful.
Thank you.